So we turn from the range to a much more complicated measure of how spread out the data is, known as the standard deviation. Standard deviation. All right, and what the standard deviation does is it measures the average spread of the data relative to the mean. In other words, the standard deviation, we first figure out the mean, and then we figure out how far our data values overall fall from the mean, and we kind of do an average of those. Okay. So the standard deviation process involves several steps. So I'm going to first give you those steps, and then we'll take a look at those steps in an example here. So the first step in computing the standard deviation is to compute the mean. In other words, take all of our data values, add them all up, and divide by the total. So we compute the mean. We compute the mean. Okay. Step 2 is we find the difference between each data value and the mean. In other words, we compute data value minus the mean. And then what we do, step 3 seems a little strange, is we square the result. Take each of those answers and square it. Step 4, we take and we add up the values from step 3. Okay. Step 5, we take that answer and we divide by n minus 1, where n is the number of data values. Where n is the number of data values. Okay, and then one final step, we undo the squaring that we did earlier by taking the square root. Now myself, I very often combine steps 5 and 6 together. I do the dividing and the square root all in one step. There's a reason for why you divide by n minus 1 instead of n, It's beyond the scope of our course. It was something I actually knew at one time when I was taking a graduate level statistics class, but it wasn't important enough for me to want to remember. So there was a reason for why we divide by n minus 1, but it's not important for us. Okay, so let's take this and let's apply it to a group of data. Let's apply it to a set of data. So up above, we had two sets of data that we started with. 1, 3, 7, 12. 12 was one of them. Okay. And so the first thing we do is compute the mean. So remember to compute the mean. We just add all of our data values up. And divide by the total, which in this case was 5. Of course, if we add all those up, we get 35 divided by 5. Just like we discussed earlier, our mean is 7. For steps 2, 3, and 4, I like to create a chart. I think creating a chart makes those steps a little bit easier. So I make a little chart here. And in that chart, I write down 3 columns. The first column is just my data value, then my data value minus the mean, and then my data value minus the mean squared. So just write down each of my data values, 1, 3, 7, 12, and 12. And then we're just going to take each data value and we're going to subtract off the mean. So when we begin, 1 minus 7 would be negative 6. 3 minus 7 would be negative 4. 7 minus 7 would be 0. 12 minus 7 would be 5. 12 minus 7 would be 5. You can kind of see why right now if we took these values as the negative values they are, negative 6, negative 4, 5, and 0, and we added all those up, we just end up getting 0. Right? So that's part of the reason why this process squares them. We square them to make the signs go away. So we would go through here in step 3. So here we've done now step 2. Take the difference for each value. Now we're going to do step 3. We're going to take each of those answers and square them. So minus 6 squared would be 36. Minus 4 squared would be 16. 0 squared would be 0. 5 squared would be 25. 5 squared would be 25 again. And then we total those all up. 36, 16, 25, and 25. Okay, so step 4, we add all those values up. And when we do that, 25, 25, 16, and 36, we get 102. So again, just to recap what we've done so far, we begin step 1 by finding our average. Okay. Average our data values. So in other words, add them all up, divide by the total. We then compute each data value minus the mean, and then we square all those answers, and then we add them up to get our total. Okay. And then step 5, we divide by 1 less than our number of data values. We had 5 data values here, so we're going to take that answer, 102, and we're going to divide it by the number of data values minus 1. In other words, we're going to divide by 4. And when we do that division, we will get 25.5. And then the final step, step 6, is to take the square root of that answer. So if we go into a calculator and do that, square root key, mine is this, my square root key is in the first row there. You can kind of see it light up if I bring the mouse over maybe. Here we are, square root of x key. Mine pops up as SQRT. A lot of times your calculators will do that symbol. Most calculators nowadays tend to do the parentheses, but not all. So if you're putting in more than one thing, definitely write down the parentheses. And then it's 25.5. And then usually, once we get an answer, we round it off to a couple decimal places. In this problem, I'm going to round off to 2 decimal places. Give me an answer of 5.05, rounding off there. Okay. You could, of course, have done it in one step. 102 divided by the 4. All right, done it all in one step there. And that's a lot of times what I'll do to save a little bit of time. And we get the same answer, 5.05. So the average spread, we take the spread for each data value away from the mean, kind of average it out, it becomes 5.05. 5.05. So that is the standard deviation.